This is the XPhase, a 360 camera with 25 lenses and a 200 megapixel resolution. And it's also surprisingly affordable. And even though it has such high resolution, it's actually not its most amazing feature. There's one more feature that it has that I haven't seen in any other camera. We're going to talk about its specifications and its features, including 3 key advantages. I'll show you how to use it, and then we'll take a look at some sample photos both indoors and outdoors, and even a few in low light. We'll talk about who this camera is for, and I'll show you 5 ways to use its high resolution. And it's not just for virtual tours. My name is Mick, and this channel is about 360 and 3PV. If you want to learn how to shoot without aiming, or how to capture a third-person view, hit subscribe and learn about this exciting new way to capture your photos and videos. What if you could get the detail of a DSLR with the convenience of a 360 camera? Well, that's the concept behind the XPhase. So the XPhase is a 360 camera with 25 sensors, and each sensor is an 8 megapixel BSI CMOS sensor. So there are 3 rows of 7 sensors, and then there are 2 more on top and 2 more on the bottom. It's amazingly compact for a camera with 25 sensors. I mean, look at it. Here's the Gear 360 with 2 lenses, and this one has 25, and they're almost the same size. Well, excluding the handle, of course. That's an amazing feat of engineering. Now, unlike most 360 cameras that use circular fisheye lenses, the XPhase uses wide-angle rectilinear lenses. So each sensor uses the full 8 megapixels. That gives it a big advantage for resolution, but sacrifices stitching. How good is the stitching? We'll find out later. It has 25 sensors and you have 8 megapixels each. That's why they call it a 200 megapixel 360 camera. But the stitched resolution is actually 16384 by 8192. By comparison, typical 360 cameras are around 15 to 16 megapixels. So that's almost 9 times as much resolution as an ordinary 360 camera. So when I saw the XPhase Pro specs and its features, and then I saw its price, I said, man, this can't be real. It sounds too good to be true. Now, we've all seen those cameras with super high specs, and it turns out that it's actually not as good. And I was honestly worried that the XPhase would be one of those cameras, especially for the price, right? So I was really skeptical. I was also worried about the workflow. With 25 sensors, I was bracing for a really complicated workflow. I had the chance to use a pre-release version of the XPhase Pro, and I went to Pasadena to take some test shots. What I saw surprised me. But first, let's learn how to shoot with the XPhase. Shooting with the XPhase is really easy, even though it has 25 lenses and it looks complicated. The workflow is simple and it works either on the phone or desktop. Here's the XPhase. It has only one button. If you press this button, it's going to take a photo, or if you double click, then it's going to activate a 5-second self-timer and take a shot. You can do a triple click for a 10-second timer or a quadruple click for a 20-second self-timer. To my surprise, XPhase was as detailed as it claimed to be. Besides its high resolution, XPhase has 3 key advantages. And number 1, by the way, this is the feature that I told you about that I haven't seen in any other camera, 360 or otherwise. HDR without ghosting. Normally, when there's any movement, it shows up as ghosting in the HDR image. Now, the XPhase can take HDR photos without ghosting. So there could be movement anywhere in the photo, but there would be no ghosting. In fact, the camera itself could be moving and there would still be no ghosting. Now that's amazing and allows you to take HDR in situations that would otherwise have been impossible. Number 2 is stitching. So normally high resolution 360 cameras use more than 2 lenses. And because of that, the lenses have greater distance between each other, so there's greater parallax stitching error. So the minimum stitching distance is usually 5 feet or greater. With the XPhase, they claim a minimum stitching distance of 1 foot. Is that real? We'll find out later. And number 3 is price. This is the Theta Z1. It has 2 sensors. It's a resolution of 24 megapixels. This is $999. Now this is the Aletta S2C. It has 5 sensors. It has a resolution of 66 megapixels. This is $1,200. This is the Panono. It has 36 lenses and a resolution of 108 megapixels. This is about $2,100. This, of course, is the XPhase with 25 sensors, a resolution of 200 megapixels, and it's $879. So now you know why a lot of people are excited about this camera. And in addition, I talked to the distributor to give you guys a special deal. So you can get a free 128 gig storage on top of the 32 gigs that it comes with. All you have to do is use my special link in the description below. Now if you want to change the settings, you'll need to use the app. It's really easy to use and it's available for both iOS and Android. Just connect the Wi-Fi to the XPhase Wi-Fi signal. Now we can launch the app. Tap on connect and you hear the 5 beeps. You press the shutter twice. Now that they're paired, you'll be able to control the XPhase. So the settings for shooting appear here. So you tap on that and you can choose between handheld or tripod mode. Tripod mode means that it'll tend to use the lower ISO to keep the noise level down. Whereas with handheld, it will try to use the higher shutter speed. Exposure compensation is plus minus 2 EV in 1/3 stop increments. The exposure tends to be a little bit aggressive. It tends to overexpose. So I prefer to set the exposure compensation to -1 or even -2 EV to preserve the highlights. When you're ready to shoot, just click on OK and then you press the shutter and it's going to take the photo. And give it like about 10 seconds. You'll hear a double beep, which means it's ready for the next shot. Now because we've been shooting with the app, the file is actually already transferred to the phone over here, and that progress bar here means that the phone app is actually stitching it for us. So here it is. This icon shows that it's been stitched. So you tap on that icon and here it is. Here's the fully stitched photo. Now that photo is also now on your phone, so you can share it to social media. Go to your phone gallery and look for an album called Pictures, and that's where you'll find your stitched XPhase Pro photos. Resolutions 16384 by 8192, all on your phone. So how's the image quality? The photos have extremely high detail, more detail than any other 360 camera I've tried. Chromatic aberration is also very well controlled. The dynamic range is also very good thanks to its HDR. And I'm still amazed how they were able to do HDR without ghosting. I can even shoot photos handheld. How's the stitching? Is it true that the minimum stitching distance is 1 foot? Well, there's good news and bad news. The good news is that the XPhase stitching is usually smooth and I can take photos even in small bathrooms. And yes, it is even possible for XPhase to stitch as close as 1 foot. In this shot, my dad's hand is only about 1 foot from the camera, but the stitch looks pretty good. That is truly amazing for a multi-lens camera. But there are 2 issues. First, if you are very close to the camera, it's more likely you'll get a stitching error. With very tight spaces, such as car interiors, you will definitely have stitching errors. So I would say a more realistic minimum stitching distance is around 3 feet. Second, sometimes there are stitching errors even when there's nothing near the camera and even for distant objects. So the XPhase's stitching is very impressive for a multi-lens camera, but it's sometimes imperfect. Colors and contrast appear natural, although white balance indoors is not always accurate. One weakness is that XPhase is susceptible to flare, which reduces contrast in affected lenses and also produces some glare artifacts near the key light. It also doesn't do so well in low light. In very low light conditions, there's little detail in shadows. Finally, in my pre-release unit, one or more lenses is slightly back focused. XPhase, however, claims that this issue will be addressed in the new upgraded XPhase coming in August 2019. Now your phone will stitch the photos in JPEG format, but for higher quality editing, you want to be able to export them in PNG format. It's going to be 16-bit and it's lossless, and you'll have more flexibility to edit your photos. So to do that, you need to use the desktop app. The desktop app has a little bit of a quirky interface, but it's also very easy to use. So it's a one-step process. So you open the ORI files in Panel Manager. You do that by clicking on this Wi-Fi icon. I know, right? You'll see a folder, and you click on that, and then you select the folder where your ORI files are stored. Next, you select the photos you want to stitch, and then you click on Stitch. Now, you'll have the option to export it in three formats. One is JPEG, the other is PNG, 16-bit lossless PNG, and the third one is PNO format. Now, if you choose to export in PNG format, there are several settings you can choose. Number one is the white balance, and number two is the contrast, and number three is something they call expansion. Expanded mode extends the edge so that you can edit the photo in post-processing, then later crop it back to normal equirectangular ratio to avoid a seam. It's gonna stitch and fuse the HDR in one step, and you can batch export your photos. Alright, so the high resolution is real, but do you really need it? Well, here are 5 ways to use that high resolution. The number one is virtual tours. A lot of people now offer virtual tours and they're shooting them with 360 cameras. How do you stand out from the competition? Well, one way is by offering higher image quality. With the XPhase, you can offer higher detail than any other 360 camera. 2. Tiny planets. When you're shooting with the tiny planet, the edges of the frame will look really stretched and pixelated. But with the XPhase's high resolution, even the edges will look detailed. 3. Distant subjects. When you're shooting with the 360 camera, anything that's more than a few feet away is not going to have much detail. But with the XPhase, you can take shots that have detail even for distant objects. 4 is pole photography. This is when you take a 360 photo from a really high pole or mast. You'll be able to capture a unique perspective, but this is a very challenging type of 360 photo. You'll need not just special equipment, but also special techniques. You'll need to keep it stable somehow, and second, you'll need to be able to capture very high resolution, because from a really high perspective, everything's going to be distant. Now with the XPhase, pole photography is really easy. Not only can you shoot automatically, but because the HDR has no ghosting, you'll be able to take photos even handheld. And number 5 is super sampling. Even if you don't care about super high resolution, you can still get much higher image quality by capturing at a higher resolution and then downscaling it to your preferred resolution. Now there's something I haven't told you yet, which is how does the XPhase compare to a DSLR panorama? And I'm sure you want to know. Now the truth is I've already done the test shots. I took them last weekend and I did it with the Aletta S2C, the Panono, and the Ricoh Theta Z1. But the results were not what I expected. So that's going to be my next video. Don't miss it. Thanks, and I'll see you in 360.